Due to the audio difficulty, I would like to dub over my original proposal. I propose that my presentation for the upcoming webinar on ICT and cultural dynamism is that I would like to do an action research on a virtual social entrepreneurship program that include an ecosystem of stakeholder and partners in the development of a regenerative program more than just for output.
But to be able to case study it with the youth and be able to have them on the panel. One of the things that I've been thinking about our instructional design is how can we create a seminar or a webinar that is dynamic where the youth have input in what we're doing. And while
Okay.
making it, actually get them as the advisor to give feedback. And so, in a way, this case study is a survey of cultural dynamism and ICT, and it's giving real life feedback. And we need to do something that to me is live and raw and give feedback.
Mhm.
And when we do the next one, people want to see it because they want to see what has changed. How real is it? You know, is it effective? You know, and then document this stuff because to me this is the research that no one is doing. Let's make it live and let's do really action learning with the youth, with the curriculum, with the cultural dynamism. Otherwise, we teach in the East and we teach nowadays online to classify us, and they go through the process, but it's not dynamic.
This thing that we're talking about now could really be something to be shared, and I believe our university is starting to move in that direction, and also there are some have experienced that. And given the conditions now that we're having, and then having all these programs for internationalization, this is what they need. They have to learn something new from other countries, that even though you have your own culture to be shared, you still maintain your identity. And that identity would bring how dynamic you are when you're dealing with your programs, when you're dealing with uh, partnerships, when you're dealing with researches. Then there is an immediate exchange of all of this. And then while you're doing that, then that will bring some sort of learning process, because you'll be sharing all these practices that you've done, these systems that you have done that would support social development, for example, for your university personnel, or if you want to look at it in a more academic, you look at your clients who are your students, and then you can look at also what organizational culture do you have, that when they will see you, it reflects your identity, your integrity as a person or an individual. So getting all of these things will bring you to say, yes, I'm into it. That's the reason why I'm responsive, I'm resilient, and I'm dynamic in a way. Then I could support this. So given that experience, for example, from my case, I could say, well, I deal with my colleagues, with our president, with our management in this way. That's why we get more to be responsive and adaptive. While if I'll deal with my students, it's from their point of view that I encourage them to talk, because that's how you bring in who you are. And this is where you will say, I am identified with this particular culture. I know what I'm doing because this is who I am. You will be defending all your cultural integrity, and that is basically would be the foundation of this dynamism we're talking about. So if you elevate how society, community, with their respective cultures, then all of a sudden you'll just see dynamic development. That's how I see it. So what do you think, Im? Will that make sense if what you're proposing, that if we will have like a case what's happening within our university, and then sharing it in one of the discussions that this is happening. It happens in the Philippines, particularly Marlow University, because although we have this particular identity, cultural identity, we still be as responsive and dynamic because of the changes happening in the world, the changes happening in our university, how we respond to internationalization, how do we respond in global education, how do we respond now in an environment, and this brings all together as one. And with this experience, then you can, people say, so how did you do it? So we'll explain how our system works, what practices and strategies are we doing. Then there will be an exchange already, and there will be lessons learned to be shared. That's how I view it.
Well, I completely see where you're heading, and that is the academic approach to the methodology, the pedagogy of teaching. And to me, the ability to survey the youth in the process. And I don't mean to use the whole conference this way, but have one section where we actually have a presentation, but the work that I will do, it will be a digital case study. So you can actually go through the program because it'll be digitized.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be able to showcase how the youth are part of this new universality, new integration, new transformation. Because with a lot of dynamics here, you're dealing with cultural dynamism, which is there's a big generational gap on this. You know, what we think is correct,
Yeah.
and what they think is correct. And then there's even now the third one, which is, I'm saying that it's the same thing. It's just that the older generation doesn't know how to explain it in the modern way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So definitely there's something interesting that would happen in this kind, because like with our age, we are the generation that knows what happened in the past, and then what's going on now, and then we are part of the future. And then here you are, the present generation knows what they want, and that would lead us that if you'll say there's an overlay of understanding with our culture, our era, with that of the new generation, that makes it more interesting to know. And given the use of ICT, given how because right now they have their own, like, this is who we are, and we're building our own generational culture, or we're building on, you know, it goes back to, this is who we are, it's the identity. So it's this particular identity that leads them to be dynamic, to be responsive, resilient to what's going on. And then here comes now the use of ICT, here comes now policies worldwide, and then anything goes, you can follow it. So that would make it more interesting. And that if we're looking at that way, then certainly there's something to share. And the question would be, are you willing to share? Of course we're willing to share, and this is what we would like to do. This is what we want to highlight, because this is where we can learn, because we may have our weaknesses, but with these weaknesses, and we're hearing from your experience, I think we can make this more into a more positive way, and then build on removing these weaknesses, and then turn it into strengths, or something like that. I know that there are a lot, and then this would be something that I think we could do. So what you're planning now of bringing certain cases, then we can try, and then with what you have, we'll try it here as a way of understanding also who our generation and also our students, because it's different when you do it in the academy. Because right now, for me as a professor, I will just say, class, there's something new that I've read and also happening right now. I want you to do it, and they cannot argue with that. They'll just have to follow, because I'll say that will be 30% of your grade for the prelims. So they'll do it, something like that. But the thing there is, as a teacher, and I impose it for them to do, then they'll say, "Sir, we're learning in the present, and this is getting interesting. We are now understanding better who we are, at the same time how to use these tools that we have. If we combine these two, our persona, so it would be more of the transformation. And then as we do the process, that's the transition. And then if we will now understand what happened after combining this new strategy that I've learned, and I enforce, I tell my students to follow, then that starts the reform. So you can see, you transform the person first. Second, there's a transition process where they'll weigh things, but it's up to them, because that's part of their learning. And as a professor, you will also be teaching it. So both the teacher and the student will be in a process of transition to understand this exciting platform or activity, and then learn on the challenges. And then when you have blended and integrated all of this, then at the end, when you do your evaluation, you will see that there is already reform. So you're following now a process. So from transformation for the individual, transition on the system and processes, and even the procedures, and even the standards, you can question that, even the policies that you have done it. And then here comes the reform. If you want to change this, that would lead you to, it's either a development thing, or you just say, oh, it's just part of our inclusiveness activity or program. Then if you evaluate these three things, that becomes the dynamic process. Then voila, you can have that already. And that would be a very good case, if that is how you would like to be presented. And I think that's the simplest way for anybody to accept what this strategy, this approach, or whatever you call it. And it will make a difference, because people say in the Philippines, even though you're talking to fellow Filipinos, they'll say, oh, we're doing the same thing here in the South, but in the North, because your culture is different, then there are modifications. Then you look at Singapore, you look at Vietnam, you look at Thailand, then you say, oh, we're having the same thing. But when you will look at, and somebody will have a very good synthesis of this, you will find that there are commonalities already. And then these commonalities will now define the dynamic influencing factors of what you're giving in. It might be they are contributing to the strength or the weaknesses that you have, or either they'll have limiting on the weaknesses and also on the strengths. So when you analyze that, oh, contributing to weakness and also to strength, then of course that's negative and positive. Limiting on the weaknesses and then limiting on the strengths, that is already negative and negative. It becomes positive. So there's an opportunity for change, and that change is actually seen in the three: transformation, transition, and reform. Combine this together as one equals dynamism. That's how you view it, and that's how I would say that yes, we can do it. That's my view.
Once again, we're very much in alignment. There is three pillars that we talk about. The first pillar is that the new dynamism from ICT is now it's multimedia. It's no longer linguistic. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
no longer books. You know, you put on the net and you're making them read. It doesn't work. So with
Mm-hmm.
multimedia, it becomes multiple intelligence, and multiple intelligence connects deeply into their personal persona, their personal wisdom, their personal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's not just ideas and logic. You know, it's visual and music and animation and interactivity is now away from the ideal and it's more visceral. It's more abstract and it's in their body. Two, the second pillar is that we realize when you start connecting with them at that level of connection, multiple intelligence, then you'll naturally have to allow them. You have to enable them. You can start out with directed learning, but you must encourage self-directed learning so they create their own stylistic of learning. Because now you're dealing with multiple intelligence, you're dealing with the way they connect, you're dealing with beyond just the thought. It's easy with logical because you can tell me what to do, and whether I agree or not, or if I feel it in my body, I could sit here and nod head with you. But with
Mm-hmm.
I'm showing you visuals and I'm playing songs for you and I'm making you interact with it, then now if you can't have an opportunity to create your own style, you're going to feel very limited and you're going to feel very trapped. And so the second pillar is enabling them to be self-directed in their learning and creating their own stylistic learning. Especially with ICT. My God, I mean, all the software I'm looking at now is like so many, and it's so difficult when you're dealing with cultural dynamism and you're dealing with creativity. No, that's very difficult. So then the third thing, which what we want, is how we take the first two pillars of stylistic learning and self-directed learning with multiple intelligence learning and make sure that it regenerates. Because the only reason why we set these criteria for education and for learning is that we want to make sure that students learn. And the students can actually walk away and reproduce and regenerate. Not just now memorization. Memorization is no longer important. But interconnection and how do I take this and regenerate it in my own way. And regenerate it in a way so that way it can attract resource, attract, economic, attract employability, if you want to use that word. I think we're saying the exact same thing. I think you're looking at from an institution. For me, I wanted to create a webinar that I wanted them to. So I want it raw, and I want feedback, and I want the students to have feedback. And we don't have to do the whole conference that way because I know that's a big change and a lot of work for you and me. But we can at least have my section be more of an action research. And
Yeah.
okay, so that's my suggestion.
Yeah. I can see where this is going. I'm thinking now, given that when we're using all of this ICT and this everything from social media, the pillars that you have discussed, as an individual, it's how you process now everything that comes along your way. And when you're doing that, it is also related to what we're thinking on a higher level of a combination of information technology, which is on your left, and then information communication on your right. Information and information is the common word there. But when you use technology and use proper communication, this is equivalent to how you manage these two eyes, which you translate it into a more user-friendly and a common higher plane. It becomes knowledge. So when you combine IT and IC, it is basically how you look at knowledge management, and that's how I see it. So when you view this all together and you bring in what are this culture doing in this particular space and time, then that will become now the question of, can this be sustained? Is this flexible? Is this dynamic in a way, because you are now addressing gaps of IT, gaps of IC, and how do you manage all of this all together? If you bring that as one, then you will say, okay, I can now develop something flexible given uh, a, an adaptive culture, or you will say, I cannot prepare something good for my students or my teachers, or use this IT platform because their culture doesn't invite, and would say this is how they view it. So when you're talking about that, that would now tell you, oops, hold your horses, because they really don't like it, and they just want to be simple. But how can you be simple when everything now is you can see in iCloud, you can see everything. So when you view it, and somebody will just tell our whoever these people are interested in what we're doing, and say it's up to you, because we're giving you free hand to decide. But when you have that free will, the design to think for yourselves, then you must know also how to manage, because without managing it, we cannot develop farther, and that makes it more interesting. And when you say this activity is becoming an interesting thing, then you will say, well, that is something. So a flexible strategy for education could be dynamic in a way, but let's have to consider if the owners or the bearers of the culture decides to use it. Then if they say yes, then fine. The flexibility, the resiliency, the dynamism, and even the creativity will come in place together. But it all boils down, how do we manage this? So you bring in now, when you're bringing creativity, you must also come here into planning. When you bring diversity, you must bring in planning too. But when it comes to flexibility, this is up to you now. How do I program these plans with this time, with my resources? And then finally, if it is so flexible with these programs and with this plan, can I evaluate it? Then you say yes, because there's a result already. What is that result? It's an impact. The impact will now be on the chains of, one, the cognitive thing, the thinking aspect. Then second, I feel good about it, so I will continue. So that's effective. And then much more, because now kids without any gadgets cannot work with the hands. So the hands will not say, yes, I can do it. So that's how it is. So if you combine the heart, the mind, and your hands, then there's something. And everything will just, okay, they're so adaptive. Then you will say, at the end, when you will evaluate it and properly manage it, you'll say, oh, it's really something about the dynamic, whether he is socially inclined or culturally backward or culturally adapted. That makes the whole thing. So these are all part of how we look knowledge as a product, and that product could be an information, could be a technology, or could be a system, or even a process. So this will all boil down, how do I manage all of this? If I can manage it this way, then I'll say I'm dynamic, I am flexible, and then I can change. And collectively, one part of a single individual could influence now. So there's a ripple effect already on that aspect. So you can now, if you look at from the perspective of community development, you are now creating a community of interest. So once you have created the awareness level, then you can now instill to them, this is what we have set up, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and if you will follow this, you will definitely have an output. So if you an output will give you the liberty to evaluate it also. Once you evaluate it and you only find out of the 10, you only find 8, then the 2 will be reviewed, then it goes back to the drawing board and then integrated again until such time that you follow the 10. Once you follow the 10 and then you apply it, you're now creating what we call community of practice. So that's how we'll now see the growth. It becomes inclusive everything. You have the resources, you have the process, you have the strategy, you have the staff, and then you have your outputs laid out together with your plans and programs. Then all of these are on plate. Somebody has to look into that, and that is what we call now the manager of whoever that would be. And in the end, you'll just say these are all simple. Whether you're using your creativity, you're using your artistry, you're using analytical aspect or whatever you call it, then you'll say that is what we want to know. And that should be the kind of thinking that we would like this particular student to grow as he grows and respond to this world. Together, how will the teacher be trained for this? So we will be looking at capacitation for the teachers, and then also improving the competency level, both from the mental, attitudinal, and even the psychomotor of this individual. So that makes it work, and I think that's how we have to do it. And if this work, then there will be changes. There will be exchanges already. Then it becomes a researchable area, then you can apply it as one case. Then go to another place, another university or another country, combine all and make an analysis, then you'll have all these things. And that's how I view it. And I think that would be the best part that we can do. How we look at very simple thing. Like if you know I think it's one of your drawings that I saw from a single dot, and then you keep on spinning and spinning until it becomes bigger and bigger. The bigger it goes, it's not perfect spiral, but there are some with uneven sizes, and then you will determine what happened in this, and then you will see from this it will just be saying, oh, because my muscle is already aching here, so I cannot make that perfect consistency of making that spiral thing. So that's how we want to evaluate it, and that's how we should present the case, because this is where individuals will learn what did you do when you had this space and time. What is this happening? And they said, oh, during that time we were delayed with resources, and then at that particular time there was power failure. So what we did was we used a generator. So when we were teaching, it was not effective because the classroom was like this, and that makes. And then your question is, were you adaptive enough? And then we said, yes, because in my practice, and then how I was used to. So you will now bring the experience which is anchored on culture. You'll say, yes, we brought fans because the fans could be run by our generator. So the learning was there, but you see our students were restless. Even the teacher was restless as we were observing them. So it's like that. It's if you place your palm this way, then you start moving it outward. For the first 3 circles, it's constant. But as you make it bigger and bigger, you will know that the right hand will be creating a bigger circle compared to the left hand, because you are right-handed. And that is based on how you think and how you feel. But if you were trained to do both in a balance, then you will say, oops, yes, that's how we do it. That's how we do it. Come on, bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger, and that's it. And this explanation, it's something to do with dynamic movement. And then incorporating the social-cultural dimension, that is where the attitude and behavior comes in. So if you do this thing, it's like, yes, I can feel it bigger. Then of course you will feel the ache already, because you're not used to of moving your left hand because you're a right-handed, or vice versa. So that's how it is. So you become now adaptive, you become now resilient, and then you will be identifying also risks that affects, and the risk could be influenced by these resources. So you go back to the basic, what's happening. So bottom line there is, do this individual know how to manage his or her resources? And if these resources are properly managed, are these resources equivalent to information or equivalent to technology, or is it a knowledge as a whole? And will it affect a certain culture? So if your answer is yes, then fine, go ahead. If not, okay, let's address why it's not being used, because this is the reality. So you can bring anything, but again, bottom line there is, you must know how to manage this transformation for an individual, the transitional processes that is happening, and then the reform that you would like this to happen at the end of this process. That's how I view it. See? That's what I think of. So if we will try to exchange and bring in, like what you mentioned, the social entrepreneurship, then our case in our university will be something interesting, because this is how we do it. So it's up to us to talk. It's up to us to tell, yes, we're doing that, because social entrepreneurship, we're bringing in a lot of innovations. And then if you are innovative in a process, then you are already addressing the transition process. And then as we bring the innovations, we're also evaluating how these individuals respond. So we are looking at their transformation from the cognitive level, affective, and then psychomotor. And then at the end, because our objective is, we want to have an inclusive and resilient, say, community. Gather all these individuals, are they directing themselves to that particular reform? And then if they say yes, and then you find a very good result, then you'll say it's working. And that makes it great. But of course, you will not say it's perfect, because everything, this is not perfect. It evolves. My experience will be different from yours. But the most important thing is, whoever will be the one to document it and then be part of this, then they will say, okay, I can say something. I can work with this. I can say that, okay, my experience may be similar to you, but you'll say, I made an adjustment because I did not have the full resources like what you have experienced in your particular case, because you've got better government policies, government support, good leader. But in my case, I have to adjust because I am adaptive. And that makes it dynamic. And that makes it more manageable on my part. So that's how I view it, right?
It's very clear of this cultural dynamism and ICT, which is not technology and it's not hardwired. It is an art form. You know, it is science and art. And when you have science and art, and you have, if you allow it, we don't know where we will go. My favorite line is in the Tron movie. He says, the digital frontier to reshape the human condition. Okay? And this is what we are dealing with right now. We're not just teaching, sharing cultural dynamism, and we're not showcasing ICT. We are redefining the human condition.
That's right. That's right.